Emmi Beuger's Day Off, the weekly opinion editorial podcast from the Daily Collegian. I'm Emmi Beuger, and I've been so busy that I literally have not recorded this podcast in at least a month.
And I'm Jake, the producer, who is also the guest for today's show. And I've also been similarly busy, and that's going to be the subject of today's podcast.
So, last week, I wrote an article called Sleep is Not for the Weak, and in the article, I examined how exhaustion is sort of a cultural thing here on campus and on most college campuses. So, the article basically talked a lot about how, well, this is a personal plug, talked a lot about how we have this culture around bragging about how exhausted we are, how busy we are. We're all busy, but we try to make it a competition to see who's the busiest, who has the least amount of hours of sleep, who's the most stressed, etc., etc. I talk a little bit about the importance of self-care, because that's a really big thing, and we're not taught that even in high school, and as well as how important sleep is. Sleep is super, super important. I'm a huge proponent of sleep. I get at least 8 hours every single night, and I'm still exhausted. But, we still try to get sleep, and how sleep is kind of this weird thing that we talk about, how people are like, oh, not getting sleep, like, that's okay, but it's not. So that's basically what I talked about, and talked about how burnout is real. So, any initial thoughts on that, Jake?
I guess all I can say is that I am the opposite in terms of sleep as you. So I have experiences to share on that matter. But I think exhaustion is an enormous part of the UMass landscape. And even though it's maybe not something that's talked about, it's definitely something that every student feels. Like, I don't know a student that isn't always tired.
So I talk a lot about how, there's this expectation that we're supposed to be exhausted. Have you experienced that?
Definitely, especially in my major. I'm a computer science major, for those who don't know. And although I have lots of friends in computer science, in engineering, in very difficult majors, and I think one thing I've noticed specifically in my major alongside these other STEM majors is that there's this expectation that you're going to stay up all night doing this homework, and that there's very few people I know who go to bed on time, with maybe the exception of the people I live with, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah, it's definitely within the major and within a lot of people I know in these difficult STEM majors, people just don't get enough sleep, and it's kind of through these marathon homework sessions that we all do together.
Yeah, I don't have as much homework as a poli-sci international relations major, but I do have a lot of writing, and a lot of people within those kind of majors, social sciences majors, also have a sort of similar experience in terms of writing a 10-page paper in one night and things like that, and how that's kind of like a triumph when maybe we should be focusing on avoiding that and trying to balance that somehow. But I don't have the answer to that question.
Spreading out your work is an ideal goal, but I think there's definitely this default to doing things the night before that is around the entire campus and campuses around the country. Definitely not UMass.
I know, I don't think I can name one person who doesn't claim to be a procrastinator. So, Jake, you have a unique perspective on exhaustion and work-life balance because you're an athlete. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so I'm on the men's crew team, and for those of you who don't know, we are a club sport that compete with division teams. So we put in the same amount of work. Actually, we put more work in than Division III schools, but we don't get any of the funding. We don't get any of the recognition. And as a result, we are on a pretty wacky schedule. I live in a house with, there's 10 of us. We're all on the team, and pretty much the house is asleep by 9 or 10, except for the few of us, which we'll talk about later, that are up doing homework past that time. And then we all wake up at 4:45, 5 in the morning, and we go out, we row, we eat breakfast as soon as we get back. And some people even struggle to make their 8 a.m.s, and we're just on this constant cycle. We have afternoon practices, which range from an hour to 2, maybe 3 hours. And so we're always on this constant cycle of try to sleep early, usually fail, and then wake up super early. So we were always exhausted.
Oh my gosh. So how did you even begin to start trying to control your sleep and all of that? What's that like?
So I went to college. I rowed all through high school, and we had some morning practices, so I knew kind of what I was getting into. And I knew I wanted to aim for 9 o'clock to go to bed and wake up at 4:45, 5 o'clock. And I've consistently missed that every single night. I don't think I've gotten to bed at 9 o'clock this year, but I'm usually my goal is to finish my homework as efficiently as possible, to get it as close to that 9 p.m. bedtime as possible. And if I miss it, which I usually do, I try to catch up during the day with naps. A lot of people on the team slip a nap in right after practice. They get that 20-minute power nap or that 90-minute. Those are the two shortest optimal times. And they feel refreshed after that. I struggle to fit that in because I usually will just pass out and wake up at 3 in the afternoon. And I sleep through all of my alarms. I'm a super heavy sleeper. So I sort of just power through the day and attempt to structure it around that. So I wouldn't say I'm the best example of how properly to structure your college experience with crew. But I definitely know people who have done it better than I have. Whether that's with help like coffee, naps, all things I'm not very good at.
You're not good at coffee?
No, actually, caffeine doesn't really affect me. And one of my electives is Nutrition 130. We were talking about this in class today. There's a caffeine gene, it's called, which is basically like determines whether you metabolize caffeine quickly or slowly. And I guess I'm one of those people that just metabolizes it really quickly, like people who can take a lot of alcohol. That's me with caffeine. I used to work at a bakery, and people would mess up espresso shots all the time, and I would drink them. And I realized I was drinking a lot, and I wasn't feeling anything, so I counted. And I was taking in like 3,600 milligrams of caffeine a day.
Oh my gosh.
And the recommended amount is 400. So that's like 9 times how much you're supposed to take in. So I found out, I guess I am one of those people who just metabolizes caffeine really quickly. So I feel no effects.
That's a lot of, as an avid coffee drinker, I don't even think I get to the 400. I can't even do 400. Like, I get so jittery. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't really drink coffee because I don't like the taste enough. I like the smell.
It smells the best.
It smells great.
I
love the smell. But it doesn't wake me up. Like, I'll still fall. I could probably drink like 2 or 3 cups at night and still fall asleep. So I don't know.
Wow, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, I mean, I learned most of this today. It was just something I knew in the back of my mind.
Both learned today.
Caffeine doesn't really affect me, and that turns out there's a reason for it.
That's actually kind of cool.
The more you know.
How has this affected you every day? Has it affected your schoolwork? You know, does it take a toll on you? Because according to my research that I did for this article, basic Google searches, it should.
I guess. Yeah, it definitely takes a toll on me, and that can be most felt this week, actually, of all weeks. I've got a bunch of exams and homework, excuse me again, coming up that I'm completely unprepared for and ready to have no sleep over. Most of that is my fault, but it's definitely just sort of things compounding. And I think as you get less sleep and as you feel more and more exhausted, you start to get flakier on homeworks, you start to pay less attention in class. I struggle to pay attention in my 1 p.m. class because that's pretty much when I start to crash from being awake so early in the morning. And because of that, I'm starting to fall behind in that, and then everything sort of cascades. It's a tsunami of work. As you miss one concept, it doesn't build up. So the toll is accumulative over the course of the semester, though every so often I try to kind of reset and try to have a new approach to exhaustion, and occasionally it works, sometimes it doesn't. Hopefully next semester it'll work a lot better than it did this semester.
So you were saying that you had a lot of issues this weekend with exhaustion. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was a participant in Hacky Mass 5. There was about 800 of us, I believe they said.
Wow.
So it's just all computer science students, engineering students, mostly computer science and engineers. Though we had one guy on my team who, he's an astrophysicist. I forget specifically what his list of majors are, but he's a really smart dude.
Wow.
And yeah, basically it's hardware and software hacking, where you're sort of tinkering, building projects, building robots, building applications, websites, all kinds of things using tools and advice from sponsors and mentors that they have all over the place. So on Friday evening at like 9 o'clock, they herded us into the ILC, and they basically, they herded us into the student union, gave us a little talk explaining what was going on, and they all threw us in the ILC, and we basically started hacking after midnight. We had a bunch of companies there. Amazon, they all gave tech talks and stuff, and we pretty much were churning from Friday until like Sunday at 10 a.m. when they submit the projects. And they announced it winners at like 3 or 4. So it was a crazy weekend. My first ever hackathon, and I got probably 2 hours of sleep in 3 days. So it was an event.
So what are these projects that you're doing that they take so much work, and why do you start at midnight? That's a interesting starting time.
Yeah, definitely. Hackathons, there's a bunch of them. Hack UMass is one of the biggest in New England, but there's Boston Hacks, all these things, and they all start, some of them are like 8 hours, some of them are a single day, but some of the bigger ones, like Hack UMass, they span multiple days, and it's kind of this fun event where you basically get a bunch of people together, and you all assume no one's getting any sleep. You're all grouping up, and you were just working your butt off to finish these hardware projects. Like for an example of one, a group next to me actually completed theirs, and theirs is called IRL Pong. It took two servos, two little motors that rotated this like 3D, like the old game Pong, which had like a paddle that would go up and down where you hit the ball off of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically doing that in 3D with like a real ping pong ball using this camera that tracked the ping pong ball.
Oh my
This is
gosh.
crazy stuff. So you use all these fun tools and APIs that the companies provide, and you just assume you're getting no sleep and you're just working your butt off.
Do you think it's possible to win a hackathon or do well at a hackathon if you do get adequate sleep?
I'd say no. If you got 8 hours of sleep, definitely not, because you probably wouldn't finish. But if you planned out well enough and got lucky enough for everything that you were working on to work,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely probably could pull off like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night and still finish. The big thing about hackathons is that there's a lot of restrictions in terms of hardware availability. So if you have a project that relies on a certain sensor or a certain piece of like a robot or something, and that hardware isn't available or isn't reliable, as it was in our case, you're basically set back. Like we were working on a project for 5 or 6 hours until we realized that the hardware we were using was complete garbage, and we had to start over. And if we didn't have that issue, or the hardware worked fine, or if we knew the hardware wasn't going to work, we probably would have been able to finish quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if everything goes right and you plan ahead, it's doable. Though I think planning ahead and having everything go according to plan is definitely a theme of everything when it comes to getting enough sleep and being less exhausted.
So after this whole weekend, you had a crazy weekend, exhausting weekend. So what are you going to do to help yourself be less exhausted and give our listeners some tips on self-care, because it's important?
Okay. So for self-care, I definitely don't do enough of it. But I guess in order to make an effort to kind of get on top of things and sort of reel myself back in after the past couple of weeks, I'm definitely going to try to get more sleep.
That's key.
It is
Major key.
Number one thing. Sleep and food are like the two biggest things.
Major keys.
Exactly. So getting enough sleep is going to be huge. And a big part of that is with this crew season ending, I no longer have to wake up so early. And I should be able to start waking up right before my class like most college students. And another thing is getting on top of my homework to allow me to get that sleep. Big thing will be eating healthier. So I need to reset, eat a lot more lean protein like chicken, eat salads, kind of get back to the basics. The whole idea of cleanses is kind of BS, so don't do that. But I definitely recommend going back and eating at least cleaner foods. There's quotes around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess on top of that is mobility. Because I'm on the team, when I'm working out, if I don't have enough time, I will skip warm-ups, I will skip cool-downs, skip stretches. Everyone does it where they kind of skimp on those kind of things, and you really can't, because then you end up being stiff and broken and injure yourself, like I'm starting to do with both my shoulders and my knees. So I need to
good.
mobilize, band out, ball out with like if you're an athlete, you know, if you stick like a lacrosse ball underneath your butt or your hamstring and get kind of mobilized those. Yeah, so big three: sleep, eating, and then body care, I guess.
And water.
And water.
Lots and lots of water.
True. Water's huge. I'm going to drink some right now.
I totally agree with everything that you've said about self-care. I'll share some of my self-care tips. So it's really easy to be overloaded as a student, and then people, I don't know if you feel this way, when you start to enjoy things that you enjoy outside of school and you take away some time from studying or from doing homework and you feel really guilty about it, don't feel guilty about it.
Don't.
Don't. Because what I do when I'm stressed is I usually clean my room.
Same.
And that takes like an hour, but it's something that I need to do. It cleans the whole room. Your roommate will like you, as well as you're able to clear your head, and actually that makes you more productive, I think.
I think it's definitely true.
So let yourself actually take breaks and not feel guilty about it, because yes, that is an hour away from when you should have been like studying, but it actually helps you kind of refresh. I feel like refreshing is kind of like a theme here. So refreshing, doing something you like, going for a walk. I do like fashion collaging sometimes, so I like rip up magazines and just like paste them together, and I do that for like an hour, and then I go back to what I'm supposed to be doing. So, I don't know, that's one of my self-care tips. And then also indulging sometimes. When you're really sad and you have a bad day, eat some ice cream, or eat a cookie, or go to late night.
It's true.
I'm going to take Jake to late night. He's never been to late night, I don't think.
I've been to late night a couple times, but I haven't gone this year.
He hasn't experienced the real late night.
Actually, I went once. I went once this year before a race. Yeah, I don't really go to late night because I'm either doing homework or trying to go to bed. Yeah.
So we will get Jake there. We'll do a podcast live from Burke at late night.
Interview random people.
I'm going to get Ryan Ryan from Burke. We'll get him to be on it too. So it'll be really fun. But so the end of the story is that exhaustion is real and we shouldn't be bragging about it. At the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned a little bit about the competition that exists on college campuses, especially here, at least in our view, of this competition between people in terms of workload, in terms of sleep, and all of that. I mean, I talked about this in my article. I'm not immune to the behavior of, wanting to complain about how I didn't sleep all weekend because I did so much work, and someone competing saying, well, I'm busier than you. I only got 4 hours of sleep, and someone else is like, oh, well, I only got 3. And that whole issue, and that's been something that's really bothers me a lot. And this is like a culture thing. So, Jake, what is your experience with this, and how can our listeners go forward into instituting such a culture change?
Okay. So one thing I've noticed, especially, I guess the contrast here is STEM versus non-STEM, is that a lot of STEM majors kind of take pride in getting no sleep while also being really sad they got no sleep. This is definitely this dual thing going on. So there is this weird like perverted competition to have basically zero sleep. Like you see that last year there's this one guy in my dorm who would just stay in the RASC like 24/7. He would be there when I go to bed at whenever, like 9, 10, 11, and then be up still there at like 4 when I woke up.
Wow.
And so there was that kind of weird like bragging thing, like, oh, I was there all night. Like, is it really necessary? Regardless of how difficult your major is, and I think it's also this kind of bragging between the two, I guess, sides, as you put it. STEM majors thinking that non-STEM majors have no work, they get infinitely more sleep, and then the opposite where non-STEM majors say, oh, I was doing this all night, I had all this work, and there's this kind of clash, I guess, between the two, which really doesn't need to be there because we're all just trying to get a degree. We shouldn't care how much we're all sleeping. It should be all kind of a personal thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I sense that a lot within my own major, in terms of a lot of people don't sleep, and when I say, oh, well, I need this many hours of sleep every night, people look at me like, what? How do you do that? And some people, I know I'm not the best example because I literally cannot function after 12 o'clock at night, but it's just a really, really interesting. I know I was telling you earlier I want to stop using the word interesting, but it's interesting that people sleeping is such a mind-blowing concept. And sleep, we're programmed, we need it. We're programmed to need sleep, food, and water. It's an essential.
So, Emmi, here's to kind of wrap this up, I'm going to turn the tables and ask you a question. How do you think we should institute a culture change about sleep, about the way we sleep, and the competition over sleep? What should people do?
Oh, man. I mean, I think the underlying issue is competition, just in general. We're always taught that we're competing with other people. It's just this culture of perfectionism, and you always have to be the best, and you have to pretty much do whatever it takes to be the best and do better than other people. So I think looking at that first, like I wrote in my article, that this culture starts in high school. It's not just something that happens automatically when you get to college. So if something back there is happening, I don't know what. I'm not an anthropologist, sociologist, but something there is going
It's
on.
an international culture war. It started with the Cold War. We were all trying to compete with the Soviets to get into space, and now we're competing with the Chinese and India and everyone else with the whole, we're doing worse in school than these other schools. I think that's where it starts.
That was Jake's historic take
Boom.
on it.
Hot take right there.
I feel like competition is something that's inherent to our society. I'm not sure about other societies, but definitely in the United States, I feel like that's a really, really big issue. And then I think, like I wrote about in my article as well, I keep referencing my article, but the university should be doing more, I think, in terms of sleep. I know we have a sleep fair, and we have therapy dogs, and things like that, and like small self-care events, but those only happen once or twice a semester. We should be doing things throughout the semester, even, we don't have to throw events, the university should be saying, get some sleep, or, encouraging students who are not sleeping to, reach out for help and ask, their professor for help in that way, or getting study buddies, or, something like that, and teaching people how to plan so that they can actually get that sleep, because as we all know, it builds up. It cascades.
That's true. Definitely true.
It cascades. It all stems from lack of caring for yourself. And so if the university wants their students to succeed, that's something that they really need to focus on. And so I think that's something that UMass could be doing, and that we could all be doing, and not, yes, if you're tired, it's okay to complain that you're tired, but don't try to one-up other people. I think it starts at the individual level.
Definitely huge.
And I try not to do that. I know we all get sucked into it. We're all human. It happens. But maybe just trying to not really care about what other people do, and just do your own thing and try your best to get sleep and take care of yourself.
Yeah. I guess another big thing is also, this is more of an idealistic thing to change, but a huge part of this is what's being taught in class is this kind of archaic system, which hasn't really changed much in the past however many years. And I think there's definitely this this modernization in the classroom, brought up like these online courses from sites like Udemy and Coursera. We could use some of those kind of things to kind of modernize our education. And this is not something UMass can do right away, but I think it's definitely, moving forward, sleep is definitely something we all need, that we all have been getting less of as we do more with archaic systems of an archaic education system. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely not something we can kill with one magical silver bullet, but something we have to keep developing moving forward. And that's all I have to say.
Definitely, I agree, and I think that this whole new culture shift a little bit towards self-care and things like this, and bringing attention to it and the health effects and all of that, is going to be a good push for something like that.
It doesn't make you soft. It just makes you have a clearer mind and be more productive. Because competition can still be there. I'm a huge proponent of competition, but it's definitely, there's no need for this really weird, perverted competition that we have. The competition should be results, not the process.
Boom. That was perfect. I totally agree. Well, thank you, Jake, for coming on the podcast. I know you have to be here, but thank you for being my guest and letting me ask you some questions.
Anytime. I mean, you chained me to the desk, but other than that, I'm good.
Oops. So this has been Emmi Beuger's Day Off. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll be back next week.
It's the goal.
With some sleep.